Hey there, Cancer. How are you doing? So we've got the full moon coming up, the full moon in Libra, and this is the start of your 2-week forecast from the full moon in Libra right the way through to the new moon in Taurus. So this is a 2-week waning phase forecast just for you, Cancerians. Now, I don't know if you've got Cancer sun sign or if you're listening to this as a Cancer ascendant, like somebody with a Cancer rising sign. This works perfectly for rising signs, by the way. So feel free to listen to this if that is how you're going to experience this. How I'm working with this is I'm sort of describing the planetary weather over the next 2 weeks. There's a hell of a lot that's going into this. I see the ending of a couple of really big patterns and the starts, the murmurs, the whispers of new patterns, especially for you, because the moon is involved in all of these, in fact, and the moon is your ruling planet. So hopefully this short video should be really, really useful. If you're new to this channel, hi, my name's Louisa Tanner Munson, and Feel Good Astrology is my brainchild. For me, I like to use astrology in such a way that it creates a sense of freedom and possibility and openness so that you don't feel like you're stuck with your forecast and your forecast is like rigid and you can't do anything with it. The way I see it is astrology is there to help you and guide you. It's there to be like a guide by the side. And that's how I practice astrology. If you've been here before and you've come back, then thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Let me know who you are so I can say hello in a future episode. Anyway, let's have a look right now and see what's going on, shall we? So I've got my trusty slideshow because I need to be kept on track. I have a tendency to wander. But anyway, we're going through the waning moon phase. So we're going from the full moon in Libra on the 13th of April, right the way through to the new moon in Taurus on the 27th of April. So exactly 2 weeks. Halfway through, we get to the third quarter point, and you'll see it's equally as light as it is dark. It is a sort of transition point. In this first week, really what's going on is we're trying to manage the results of the full moon. Around the time of the full moon, we often get very full, very expectant. We often feel quite overwhelmed emotionally, physically. We get quite worn out. Lots of things seem to be flying at us. And I always think, whatever your vibration has been over the last month, you start to really feel the truth or the results of your thinking around the time of the full moon, because it brings so many opportunities in. And so if you're getting a lot of results that feel overwhelming, then you're probably not quite on track. Maybe you've overdone it in a certain area. And so this particular phase, the waning moon phase, is really, really helpful, because after the full moon, you can start to tighten things up, let go of things that aren't going to be serving their purpose anymore, things that you don't need. And you're consciously doing this. There's the full illumination of the full moon, when you can really see your patterns. And in this first week of this 2-week forecast, you can really see what's going on. And so you can consciously let go of things. After this third quarter point, though, you see we're going into the darkness, we're going into the mystery, we're going into the unconscious mind. And so that's the point where we need to dig a little bit deeper to find out what's underneath it all. What patterns are underpinning our overwhelm. What do we need to let go of? What can we accept? What can we come to terms with? What can we release with grace and gratitude? This is a time to slow right down. And this is a time also to just really trust in the process that you're in right now. And then we get to the new moon. And that's the point where hopefully we've created a bit of a space so that we can start putting in loads of new ideas for our next moon journey. Now, if you prefer a diary look at this, I find this quite helpful, because I really like to organize things in my mind's eye and I can clearly see it. So if we're applying this as a diary, you've got your full moon in Libra on the 13th. On the 27th, you've got your new moon. That's 2 weeks later. The third quarter is on the Monday, on the 21st. And what you can see here are some of the biggest aspects coming up during this time, where planets are making little relationships, little connections with other planets. And this really describes the kind of planetary weather, the energy that's going on. And you'll see the first week is a lot busier than the second week, and they do have two very distinct different feelings. For instance, in this first week on the 13th of April, the day of the moon, the full moon in Libra, Venus, the planet, starts to go direct. So she has been retrograde since the 2nd of March. We've been internalizing a lot of our feelings, been doing a lot of soul searching, and she's going direct. And that, I think, is going to be a really good thing. Because actually, since the 26th of November last year, we've pretty much been in very personal retrogrades, Mercury retrograde twice, Mars retrograde, and Venus retrograde. There's only been 6 days difference, or 6 days without any of these three being retrograde, where we had a bit of a break, where we could have a bit of a breather and go, oh my God. Because these Mercury, Mars, and Venus retrogrades really work on us at a personal level. They really do give us a workout. They give us a lot to reflect on. And sometimes we don't feel like we've moved forwards. So I do think sometimes we need to wait for these times to pass to be able to move forwards with a sense of clarity. And so that time of clarity is coming, literally from the start of this forecast period. And then speaking of Mercury and Mars, they're both moving out of the water signs that they've been in into fire signs. So there's a sense of movement that I think is going to be really helpful. So first of all, like Mercury coming out of Pisces is a great thing. Mercury's not comfortable in the sign of Pisces. In fact, he does so much better in a sign like Aries, where he can be direct, to the point. He can really understand what's going on. He can articulate things very clearly, and he can be a bit sassy, which Mercury does quite like. Mars can come out of Cancer, your sign, and go into Leo. Now, Mars is much happier outside of Cancer. Like Cancer, bless you, there is a sort of oversensitivity, and Mars just isn't really built for the oversensitivity of Cancer. Mars does so much better in a fire sign, where he can be sort of exuberant and share his talents and share his passion and be sort of creative and playful with his energy. So I do think your mind and your body are going to start to feel upgraded and uploaded. You'll feel a bit more confident as these two personal planets are shifting into fire signs. So this is a really, really good thing. And then we've got the sun shifting into Taurus. So, Venus going direct, Mercury and Mars into a fire sign, and the sun moving forwards. It's just this lovely week of movement. So it really does feel like things are starting to move forwards. Couple of other things I like: Saturn in a conjunction to the North Node, and Venus in a conjunction to the North Node. All three of those, Venus, Saturn, and the North Node, are working in this tight little conjunction of energy. Now, Venus is about love and connection and working together and collaboration and goodwill and abundance. She really is a flow planet. She's a really lucky flow planet. And Saturn is kind of a little bit stern, a little bit formal, very practical, but very respectful, trying to get things to work, trying to get things to be fit for purpose. And so the two of them, I think, have a grace and ease. When the two of them come together, it's a bit like a balm, where we're finding solutions to practical problems and smoothing things over. And with the North Node in this sort of conjunction with these guys, I really get the feeling that we're making positive changes. We're smoothing our path in a positive way, finally moving on. So this is a great week to tie up loose ends and feel that we're moving out of one form of life and moving fresh into another. That's great. Now, as we come into that second week, there's a couple of patterns that are really, really standing out. The first one is the sun in a square to Mars. Now, Mars is the planet of action, and the sun is, how we're identifying, and they're not really working very well together. So it's almost like there's action, but it's not quite in the way that you want it. And then the sun in a square to Pluto, it's like control and fear and really wanting to get things a certain way, and yet it doesn't match the identity. So there's some identity issues coming up in week 2. And then this really leads up to the new moon in Taurus, which I think is a really, really strong new moon, and it offers lots of possibilities. However, that's also the day when Mars and Pluto go into a full opposition. See, they went into an opposition back in November the 3rd, and then again on the 3rd of January, and then they're making a last one on the 27th of April. This doesn't normally happen. This hasn't happened for a long time. Normally, Mars and Pluto come into an opposition and then they carry on moving. But we're in a different planetary flow this year, and we've had to experience the frustration of wanting to go in two different directions at the same time. So this is going to become sort of really, there's a lot of frustration around getting moving. As you start to move forwards, it feels like you're being pushed back. Now, that's not to say that the great movements in week one aren't going to take. They are going to take, I'm sure of that. But what's going on with the Pluto and the Mars thing is more of a psychological. It's, what survival mechanisms have you got that are at play right now that are holding you back, where you've got self-sabotage? Cancerians really love themselves a bit of self-sabotage. They're really good at it. So let's have a look at your charts, and I'll show you where this fits in so you can have a think about it. But just before I do, I just want to thank everybody who supports this channel. I really couldn't do this without you. I really love your support and really thank you for it. Whether you've bought me a coffee, there's a link below in the channel notes, or whether you're somebody who's come aboard with my membership. I just really love working with you. Thank you so much. You make my day. There you go. Anyway, so Cancer. This is the first chart. I've got 3 charts to represent the full moon, the third quarter, and then the new moon in Taurus. And what you'll see here is we've got Mars in your first house and Pluto here in this sort of 8th area. I'll talk about that in a second, but they're really in an opposition. Mars starts out in Cancer but moves into Leo on the 18th. And so when they come into their exact opposition, Mars is in your second house, which has to do with money and how you manage your money, your financial resources, and how you deal with other people's management of money, in particular family money, in particular inheritance, and all kinds of other shared money and resources. So it really feels like there's an ongoing situation with family monies, family values, family ideas, family feuds and things like that. So I wonder what's been going on behind the scenes and what has caught your attention. The sun and moon obviously are in opposition at the time of the full moon, because that's what a full moon is, when they're in opposite sides. But the sun up here is in a conjunction to Chiron, and Chiron's a wounded healer. Now, this is in a part of your chart to do with your career. And the sun is working in a square to Pluto and a square to Mars. Now, if I go through the whole of this period, you'll see the sun move, and you'll also see the moon move quite a lot, because the moon moves a lot faster. I'll just show you. So that's at the third quarter. The sun has moved over here and the moon has moved over here. And then the next, which is the new moon, that's where the sun and moon have come together. Now, what occurs to me is this point here, that the sun and Chiron in this 10th house, in this opposition to the full moon in Libra in your 4th house, there's a sort of tension between feeling really emotional at home and really wanting to get that sense of belonging at home, versus that feeling of needing to be away, needing to do something for your career. And it almost feels like there's a fear of succeeding that may well be hampering your efforts to earn money, and also irritating you around other people's money. So there's something about the way other people are managing their money in your life, maybe your partner, maybe your family, how they're holding their resources or holding something over you. And this is really indicating this full moon position is really indicating the tension between your comfort at home and the feeling of difficulty when you're out in your career, out in the world, and that feeling of you might be about to fail, that fear of failure, that fear of not being good enough, that fear of being excluded. And maybe that fear of being excluded actually has come from your family makeup. It goes to show how all these things can travel from one part of your chart to another, to another, to another, but they're all interrelated. The more comfortable you are at home, the less comfortable you are out here. and the more you want to take ownership of your money, the more irritated you are when other people are coming in from the other side and saying, hey, how much have you earned? So to me, it feels like there's a really sort of big energy of success boundaries in this next 2 weeks for you to work through. And some inner beliefs about yourself. See, the sun is going to move away from Chiron, but Chiron stays in a square to Pluto and advances into a square with Mars, although Mars is also moving. But, Chiron is still connected to these guys. And it does bring up a raw hurt about success or not being good enough, about never being good enough. And it's really difficult when that sort of programming comes in, like, how do you change that? What can you do to make a difference? Now, I do see that Jupiter later on this year is going to come into your first house, and that's going to be a time when your career is going to start to take off. That there is a new kind of energy that's available, and that's in early June. That's going to really, really be helpful. Also, you've got Neptune that's just come into your 10th house, and later on in May, you're going to have Venus. You're also going to have Saturn come into this area too. And that's going to create a lot more resources that you can play with. Like, for instance, you're more willing to use your creativity. You're more willing to learn from somebody. You're more willing to share your creativity and your learning in a team. So, there are different ways that you can work and solve this. But in this next 2 weeks, I really feel like you're almost not disassociating, but in that sort of Cancerian way. You're not quite sure what you're doing. You're not quite sure what action you're going to take. I think you're actually kind of coming into yourself and almost burying yourself in the sand a little bit to observe what happens, feel what's going on, and to make your mind up a little bit more slowly than maybe other signs would. What I particularly like about this, as we're coming into the time of the full moon, the new moon, is that as the sun comes into the sign of Taurus on the 19th, there is this softening, where you don't feel like it's all on your shoulders, and where you realize that a lot of what goes on in the world is actually kind of immaterial. Like, this whole idea of you needing to be a leader, you needing to be at the top of your game is kind of nuts. As the sun comes into here, there's this feeling of opportunity and this feeling of collaboration. And I see that coming up as a really strong opportunity. And then by the time we come to the new moon, it's really opening up a collaborative space that I think could really, really be beneficial for you, but also for your friendships. Now, it's at this point where I'm going to break off and bid you farewell. But before I go, I've already mentioned a little bit about your career and how things might work with your money, and also how you might be relating differently to family members that might be holding patterns against you, and also friends and networks, and how you might be bringing them closer to you. If you would like to know more about your relationships and connections, and also your career and ambitions, then you might like to consider joining my membership, my Feel Good Astrology membership. I host it on School. It's www.school.com/feelgoodastrology. And every 2 weeks, so every new moon and every full moon, I release a relationship and connections forecast for your sign, in fact, for all 12 signs, and also a career and ambition forecast. So you essentially get one every fortnight. So you get 4 forecasts every month for your sign. Now, you're listening to Cancer today. Now, I don't know if that's because that's your sun or your ascendant sign, but let's say your sun is in Sagittarius or you've got your ascendant in Libra. You could also listen to those. You get access to all 12. You see here, this is a little copy from my timeline on School. You see there's Taurus forecast, Leo forecast, Virgo forecast, goes all the way down. What this means is, if you want to look up what's going on for a family member, you've got it all there at your fingertips. Also, if you're wanting to learn a bit of astrology, you can also join me in the community hangout once a month and make friends with really cool people. I was hanging out with people just last night, and yeah, it's a really nice supportive vibe, that it really feels like a nurturing space. And if you have been considering getting a consultation or learning astrology with me or attending a webinar or something like that, then there are also discounts available. So if that sounds like something you would like to do that you'd benefit from, all you need to do is go to www.school.com/feelgoodastrology. You also get 1 week's free trial, which I really like because I think it's important to just give something a go, see how you find it, see if you like the vibe, Anyway, talking of vibes, it's time that I clear off and let you absorb all that and get into the sort of moon-like space. We're coming into this waning moment. It is time to start letting go of all the things that are no longer needed for you so you can make some really big changes. So sending you loads of love, Cancer. If I can be of any help, just get in touch. But anyway, loads and loads of love to you and hope to connect with you again real soon. Bye for now.